In our culture, we're very static in the way that we think about weight and food, and very it's almost like we've decided there's like one human that we're going to base everything off of. And it's like, this is what the person needs to eat. This is how much they should weigh. This is what will make them feel good. But like, we are so dynamic, like our genetics and biology, our personal strengths and weaknesses, like we all have systems that are strong. And then we all have different ones that are not our strong suit. And so the foods that we need to help support our personal systems are going to be dramatically different, human to human. So what food is good for you or bad for you depends on what your body is trying to do in a given moment.
Welcome to the Soul Sesh Podcast, where we dive into deep and soulful conversations with guests from all around the world about what it means to live a fully expressed and free life. I'm your host, Aaliyah, and I'm so excited to go on this journey with you. So let's dive in. Hello, beautiful souls. I am so excited and honored to bring to you today's guest, a dear sister in my life that I've had the pleasure of knowing over the past 3 years through my entrepreneurial journey. We have Amy Ornelas with us today. She is a non-diet registered dietitian, eating disorders and body image specialist, and a body positive yoga teacher. In her private practice, she utilizes a science-based, holistic mind-body approach to help people heal their relationships with food and health from the foundation up. Amy, thank you so much for being here. I already know that we are going to dive into so much gold today that's really going to help people out on their journey. So I just really appreciate you taking the time and joining us today.
Oh yeah, girl, anytime. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Yes, I'm so excited about this conversation. I've literally been just all in your Instagram and taking in all of your beautiful content. I was telling you before we started recording, but to me, your content is just such a permission slip to be yourself, to love yourself, to eat the way you want to eat, to celebrate your body exactly how it is, and just taking off this enormous pressure that we feel from society that we need to be different than who we already are. So just from the gate, I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing and for sharing your voice and your vulnerability, for putting yourself out there. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aaliyah, so much. Yeah, it is scary to have a voice that has something different to say than like the heavy mainstream media coming down on us. But yeah, it's super important to me. So thank you for acknowledging that. I love that.
Absolutely. And I want to get started really by framing our conversation. So I know that you talk a lot about the non-diet registered dietitian. So you're like totally opposed to diet culture. And I wanted to start there. I think the effects of diet culture might seem obvious for some people and maybe not for others. And I feel like that might be a beautiful way to frame our conversation. And hearing from you, from your work and the people that you've worked with and your experience, what are some of the harmful effects that we may or may not recognize about this constant narrative we're fed about diet culture and really needing our diets and our foods to be a specific way?
Okay, yes, that's such a big question, but it is like the question because diet culture, there's this beautiful saying that fish cannot see the water that they swim in. And right now in our society, diet culture is just the way it is. Like I have little kids, he's 9 now, but my son, when he was in kindergarten, like I am his mom and he would come home from school and be like, this thing has too many calories. We should only eat whole grains and all this stuff. And I'm like, why are you learning this at school? Like that is not appropriate. So the problem with food today, one of the big issues is food is not meant to be cognitive. Like food and our eating behavior and our weight regulation and stuff, it is literally part of our body's automatic functionality, like breathing and sleeping, temperature regulation. Like it's part of our body maintenance systems. And we've pulled it out of the more natural intuitive space and made it cognitive. And that is part of the issue. It's like almost like, remember in driver's ed when you're younger and like you're driving the car, but the guy next to you also has a set of brakes. Remember that weird setup? And so like you're trying to steer left and the guy's like, go right or whatever. Like that's what's happening with our bodies trying to drive us to be fed the way that our bodies need to be fed. And then our brains pulling away and trying to steer us in a different direction because of what diet culture is telling us to do. In my humble opinion, diet culture and the things that we're being taught about what's healthy, what's not, what's good, what's bad, all that stuff, it feels like seriously sinister. Like sometimes I'm like, who is the head henchman in charge of the situation? Because what ends up happening is there's a whole biological tornado. Like when you're not eating in alignment with what your body is calling for, your cells start to go into something called cellular anxiety. And so your entire body system like diverts away from your soul mission and, you know, evolvement and your higher purpose and stuff. Your cells are like, no, go find carbs. Like we're starving, you know? And so it literally stops us in our tracks in terms of becoming our highest self. And at the end of the day, that's why I am so insanely passionate about getting this work out there, because I am here for people being in their highest evolvement, and it's literally not possible when we're not nourished and our bodies aren't fully expressed. So it's a big problem, dude.
I'm curious because, you know, like what's your perspective on like, is there such a thing as bad food, or is it just our own relationship to it that defines what is good or bad?
I think I would answer that by saying it's all in context. So the issue is we think of our, okay, I would say it like this. In our culture, we're very static in the way that we think about weight and food, and very like, it's almost like we've decided there's like one human that we're going to base everything off of. And it's like, this is what the person needs to eat. This is how much they should weigh. This is what will make them feel good. But like, we are so dynamic, like our genetics and biology, our personal strengths and weaknesses. Like we all have systems that are strong. And then we all have different ones that are not our strong suit. And so the foods that we need to help support our personal systems are going to be dramatically different, human to human. So what food is good for you or bad for you depends on what your body is trying to do in a given moment. So the example I always use is like most people would say a carrot is always better than a piece of cake. But if my body already has all the fiber and vitamin A it needs for the day, but I happen to be in like a glucose deficit and I need a chunk of calories because I just burned a bunch and I was super stressed and now I'm in a hole, picking a carrot is the worst thing. Like that doesn't give me the things that I need. A piece of cake is going to satiate my need for glucose and fat in that moment and density. And so the cake is actually a healthier choice. So it just depends. And the only way you really know what you need moment to moment is learning how to listen to yourself. Our bodies, like think about temperature, for example. Like I don't have to have a chart on the wall that tells me like this jacket is the one I pull out when my temperature says 95 degrees, you know. I just intuitively feel this sense that this is what I need and I don't question it and I put a jacket on and my body balances. So it's very scary for people to even think about how do I trust my body? And this is where the sinister henchman comes in because I'm like, your body is so trustworthy, but how did we get to the place where we literally trust anyone but ourselves when it comes to food? Yeah. So, yeah.
I saw just before this on your Instagram stories, you had posted this gorgeous quote. It was something like, trust is feeling safe in your body. Like trust is a sense of safety that you feel in your body. Something like that about trust being safety.
Yeah. It was
Go
kind
ahead.
of referencing the fact that just like in a broken, let's say you're in a marriage and there's been so much damage and so much anger and thrashing and just destruction in the connection. To rebuild that connection, you have to explore differently. You have to show up differently and you have to step into a new space together and rebuild the connection. And I like that kind of concept in relation to rebuilding your relationship with your body. Like it's a severed relationship, you know. Every time throughout your life that your body says like I need pizza, the nutrition that I need. And you're like, no, you get a salad again, right there, it causes a cellular divide. Your cells become anxious because they're like, I don't need more salad. I need calcium and fat and protein and, folate or whatever. Not folate, that comes in the salad, lycopene or whatever's over there. And so every time we do that, we not only like sever the brain body connection, but we're breaking integrity with ourselves because we have a need and we're telling ourselves like, no, the need is not right. That guy over there said I need a salad and he is right. I am not right. So there's like really complex stuff that goes on when we follow diet culture.
Yeah, how do we start repairing and building that trust? I know you talk a lot about intuitive eating.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned it here. Like how does one even begin when that relationship is so severed?
Yeah. So one of the things that can be really scary for people is if you've been like denying what your body's asking for or following like this is good, that's bad kind of stuff, you can end up in a spot where you're very out of balance. So let me back up and I'll explain kind of how cravings work and the biology of that. And then definitely I can talk about like how do you get from A to B. But in the human body, this is how it goes down. All day long, my cells are talking to this organ in my stomach. There's a section of the body called the gut brain. It's basically like the wisdom center of your physical body. Your thinking brain is the conduit between the outside and the inside world. But your gut brain is the intuitive knowledge center. It gathers the feeling information from your cellular body, and then it speaks to the thinking brain to make us go out into the world and do action to take care of our inner needs. So let's say that like I have a cut on my finger right here. The cells around that cut suddenly have new nutritional needs that they didn't have a minute ago. So they will send information to the gut brain that says like, we need 5 milligrams of vitamin C and 10 grams of protein and this many calories. And then the cells over here are doing that. And my hair growth cells are doing that. And maybe I'm about to start my period. So my luteal cells are saying like, we need glucose and we need serotonin and all these things. When my blood sugar dips to a certain point, that whole ball of info from all of my cells hits the gut brain and it sends it up my spinal cord into my thinking brain. And then my thinking brain, you can think of it like every time I've ever eaten pizza in my life, there's like a little file folder kind of in my brain of like pizza. What did I get every time I ate pizza? It roughly has this many calories and this kind of nutrient profile. And like, I like it and all these things. And so my brain will assess which of the foods that I know and I can see outside of myself best match the ball of needs that I got from the gut brain. And that's what a craving is. It's your brain and body communicating like this thing matches what we're needing right now. But we're so scared because sometimes the thing my body needs is 1,000 calories in one meal because I've been busy and stressed and hectic and I waited too long to eat, Sometimes the thing I need is a whole meal and an ice cream sundae. And those are the edges where intuitive eating gets dicey because people are like, that cannot be okay. We have a lot of crazy beliefs about weight and what we should weigh and how weight gain happens and what is okay to eat and what's not. So some of the work that I do with the clients that I see, I mean, it's a process for sure. It's basically like unraveling all of the diety control stuff that we've done so far. But the first thing is making sure that you are eating consistently. And really what our bodies need to like reestablish trust and stop like cellular chaos is to eat every 3 to 4 hours at the most. So from the time you get up, just kind of rhythmically every couple of hours. And in that space, your cravings aren't like insane. If I wait 10 hours to eat, of course I'm going to need like all the Skittles because my blood sugar is super low, When you eat consistently, your cravings kind of come to a more neutralized place. Like then you are sound of mind. You're not hangry all the time and you can make rational decisions. And the second step is starting the practice of listening. I think people are shocked by how hard mindful eating is. It's so awkward to just sit there and like eat your food, but starting to slow down and like taste what you're eating and notice, just learning about like, how does your body even tell you? How do you know when you're hungry? How do you know when you're full? And then the piece that can be complex is, how do you know when you want brownies because that's what your body's asking for versus I want brownies because I had a shit day and I want to feel better. And then what do you do? Like, do I eat the brownies? Do I do something else? So there's some nuances in there, like learning what is your body trying to tell you and why, and how do I follow it, and how do I trust myself again? And so most of the work I do with people is like holding them through that journey of coming back to full self-trust.
It's really also fascinating to hear the science behind it,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the gut brain connection. And I never knew that. I never knew that there was like,
Yeah.
my body is making a profile basically of what I'm eating and
Yeah.
categorizing based off my needs, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where the craving comes from. It's
Yes.
so profound and
Yeah.
insane that like our own intelligence has the ability to be so. I mean, I'm not surprised, but I am surprised. Like, it's like shocking to
Totally.
hear, but it's not surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's shocking because that's not at all what we're coming to believe. Like if you grow up in the world these days, like that is not the message you're getting. And I feel like a lot of days, I feel like one tiny person in a corner. Like, here's a weird thing about nutrition. Dietitians are like, we're super educated. All I studied in school was food and physiology and the body and the science of how it all goes down, health and weight and all that stuff. But dietitians are a small voice in the pile of nutrition information. Like, I die when I think about this, but technically anyone in the world can be called a nutritionist. There's no license laws or regulation about that. I am a dietitian and I can be a nutritionist, but the title nutritionist is anyone. You can do it. Just write a book, it's fine. And so a lot of the nutrition information out there is not coming from actual experts. It's coming from like opinion, or I tried this diet, like you should do it too, or whatever. And food science and the way our bodies work, it's a complex system. Like, I know that you're super versed in like energetics and emotionality, the emotional body and the nervous system and lifestyle stuff. And then, the environment, all of these things impact what we need to eat and how our bodies need to be treated. And so what happens a lot with nutrition science is someone will like peel things apart. So like a carrot. Carrots are amazing for your eyes. They help with vision and they can help with gut health if you need more fiber. But like a carrot, if you have enough vitamin A, they can become toxic. Vitamin A, it's fat soluble, so you store it in your tissues. It's a whole thing. But like, you can eat too many carrots and they can be very unhealthy for you. But nutrition science generally gets reported like little windows, like for this particular system, like this is terrible, this is good. And so the comprehensive picture is not the one we get. But anyway, yeah, your body is freaking cool as hell. Like, it does not want to be ill or out of shape or anything else. But we override it all the time, and that's where we get into trouble.
I also found it so insane to learn that doctors don't learn about nutrition
I
in medical
know.
school. And it's like, what? Like,
Yes.
how that was shocking.
So, one thing that I wish everybody knew is that our medical system is like riddled with fat phobia. And fat phobia, if that's a new concept to people, like there are so many myths about weight and health and what causes illness and like how weight does or does not play a part in it. What I would like to say, in case, this is new to people, like weight is not the cause of illness in and of itself. Like, weighing more does not mean that you're going to get diabetes and have a heart attack. That is not true. But behavior does. Like, if you're at a higher weight because you diet a ton and then you binge a lot and like you're out of alignment all over the place, yeah, that's stressful to your system. But if you weigh more and your BMI is high, but like you eat regularly and like you listen to yourself and you're fine, you are not automatically at a higher risk of all these other things. So our medical system is like built on fat phobia, and it's super rude and like not okay. And yeah, doctors do not have training in nutrition, and insurance companies, they authorize nutrition and weight loss counseling by doctors and not dietitians sometimes. So I'm like, that is so freaking scary. Yeah. I think it's hard too because we look to doctors as the experts of our human bodies. But I think it's really, really important to understand that they actually, when it comes to food, a lot of times they're recommending things that maybe have worked for them or that they've seen somewhere or someone said is a good idea. Yeah, not the be all end all.
Even in my own journey, it's been this evolution of learning not to put my power, like you said, in the external voices, even of doctors. Like I think back to
Totally.
when I was younger and it's like, oh, the doctor said I need like to do this and this and this. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm just like, if it doesn't feel good to me and
Totally.
intuitively in my body, then that's what I'm listening to. And it's scary
100%.
though to make that choice
Yeah,
when the narrative is so loud.
I
Um,
so agree with you.
yeah, and I feel like to your point with food, it just I f- I feel like everyone's just so confused. Like I see it in
Mhm.
even in like my circle, like my in-laws will send something like, "Oh, this isn't true," but like, "Oh, kale is bad today," and then
Yeah.
everyone's on about that, and then like the next day it's like, "Oh, it's like the best thing ever," and there's just so much confusion.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I love that you are really inviting people back into their own body wisdom as your guidance system for how to properly eat.
Yep. I always remind people, like with myself included, like your doctor and your, chiropractor and everybody else, we are like consultants in your health picture. Like I'm here to offer you the things that I see and that I know, but I always am like, dude, run it through your own filter though. Like what I believe in, maybe it doesn't work for everybody, and that is okay. Like, if people are jamming on their food life and they feel good with what they're doing, I would never tell someone they have to do it differently. But I love what you just said. Like, yeah, our doctors, there are amazing physicians out there, and they're still consultants. I am still the one that knows best. I know my body, like, I know what I need. And I love when I get expert opinion and I'm like, okay, I didn't think about that. That I want to follow. But other things, you're like, no, I know that I don't want that. I don't need that. Yeah. One of the things that I think is critical moves with the food work, like the reason why I am so diehard, it's hard work sometimes helping people see like the reality of diet culture because we're so resistant to like acceptance, I guess. We want the guidelines because we're trained so far away from trusting ourselves. But a cool thing about practicing more intuitive eating is like if at every meal and snack you're in the practice of tuning in and asking yourself, what do I want? What do I need? How do I feel? It starts to like extrapolate to life in general. Like when you tune in, you don't just get info about like, oh, I want kale salad today. You also notice like, I want this to eat and I'm kind of feeling anxious. And I don't know if I like that conversation I just had with my boss. And I'm starting to realize like, I don't think I even want to be in my marriage anymore. So when people step out of diet culture and start to tune into themselves, it can be really overwhelming because you're now looking at like I am present with my truth. And sometimes that's a spot where we want to loop back, like, okay, no, I'm just going to control my body again. Like it feels almost safer and easier. So there's heavy stuff in there.
Is it fair to say that if you're trying to control food, it's a symptom for trying to control something else in your life that's underlying that?
There's a couple of different things I see. Usually, when I'm working with someone, the first time I meet with them, I do a full assessment and I'm really like listening and trying to feel in my own body, like, where do these wires go for this person? Sometimes people are struggling with food and it's more like cognitive, like they've just been misinformed. And as soon as they have different information, they're able to implement eating in a different way. And there's not a lot of like internal struggle and conflict. But for so many of us, I mean, another huge problem, Aaliyah, and I know you know this too, is like we do not do dark feelings in this culture. Like we do not even acknowledge that we have them. So when you start letting go of this control stuff, the answer to your question is yes. For some people, they're sitting on, like they're floating above a torrential storm under the water, but they don't know it because as long as the brain is spinning on, like, oh, what should I eat today? Okay, how much did I have? What am I eating later? Oh, shit, I ate that thing. Fuck, I hate myself. Like, I am so disgusting. I can't believe I did that. Now I got to do this tomorrow. How much am I working out? What does the scale say? your brain is like way over here. And so whatever's happening over here, we don't have any access to it. Like it's a distraction. And if that's the case, that is a person who is going to feel really, really resistant to this stuff at first. And so healing your relationship with food, it's a therapeutic path. It's not just like, oh, tell me what to eat and all is well. Like quite the opposite. It's like, I'll give you a basic structure and then we're going to explore like, what is all of this for you? Where does it go? And what do we need to heal? Not just in your food life, but like in your relationships, in your work life, like in the rhythms of how you do life, your energetics, like where are you out of alignment? And when you pull those things in, food gets a lot easier. And then reworking the way you think and feel about food, it kind of all comes together. But yes, girl, there's a lot in there. Yeah.
I'd love to hear you speak to, I saw this on your Instagram, the relationship between our bodies and our ancestry. I thought that this was so powerful. Could you
Yeah.
speak to that a bit?
Yes, it's actually a sweet thought I've had. Like, imagine standing here. I know we have some of us very complicated relationships with our female ancestors, but I love the thought that, like, me, if I look in the mirror, my face and my shape, I am the living culmination of like every single woman in my lineage that lived before me. Like, that is so cool. I just love it. Um, so our bodies, this is a real big one that like it usually takes me weeks to unpack this with people, but here's the deal. Bodies come in all shapes and sizes. And if people aren't aware of this, the BMI chart is like absolute and utter fucking bullshit. Like it's the death of me and it will not leave the medical system. It's like we live and breathe by it, you know. The terms like overweight and obesity and stuff, no. Over what weight exactly? That's the question, because some of us literally are meant to be bigger. So there's this beautiful YouTube video. It's like 2 minutes long. It's called The Problem with Poodle Science. If you've never watched it, poodle, like the dog. And the analogy is that there are all different sized dogs, right? There's like a Great Dane, there's a Chihuahua, a poodle, whatever. And we accept that they're shaped different. They need different exercise stuff. They're different. But in our culture today, it's like we've decided that the only appropriate dog is a poodle. And anyone who's not a poodle is like doing it wrong. So the Great Dane is now like a very ashamed non-poodle, but it's like he was never meant to be a poodle. What's the deal? So genetically, me sitting here today, my DNA is desperately trying to keep my lineage alive. And so my cells and what they protect or defend against, it's highly dependent on what like many generations behind me had to survive through. So if my grandparents were from the Alaskan wild, which my grandfather actually was very badass, but if they're from the Alaskan wild and it was freezing cold and there was famine, then my body might be more defensive of holding on to body weight and defending a higher weight, you know. If there was abundance, I might have a body that's much quicker to let weight go because there was never a need to hang on to extra for survival. And so this idea that like if you just try hard enough, you can be smaller is so rude. It's so cruel because we're dealing with like so much survival energetics from nature, you know, we cannot outsmart that. So yeah, I love that thought too. Like our bodies are on a mission to thrive. And if we let them be fully expressed, there isn't a struggle. But when we try to like suppress our weight, your body's like, the famine has begun, you know, and you cannot win that battle. It's at huge cost to your mental health and your spiritual evolvement.
I mean, I got chills as you were speaking of that to really reflect on the fact that I am here because of my lineage. I am here
Yeah,
because of all the people that came before me. And what a shame it would be to deny the natural expression of this body in this human
totally.
form.
Yeah. Yep. I so agree
Yeah.
with you. And along those lines, like our quirkiness and our weirdness and our humanness, you know, I mean, I know, you know, on the soul journey, like that's a huge part of it is like coming into your weird, coming into your truth. And we were just talking about this earlier before we recorded, but like how scary that is at first to be different. Here's another cool sciencey thing. We are pack animals by nature. Like humans need humans for emotional, social support, but also in caveman days, like if your tribe thought you were weird, they could leave you in the dark and you would literally die. And so sitting here today, if the culture at large is saying bigger bodies are wrong, if I have a bigger body, my brain literally thinks I'm going to die, even though logically I know that's not true. But like, well, actually, not really. We kind of tell people that, like, you're going to die if you don't lose weight. But it pulls on this very strong need for belonging that we have. So when you peel away from diet culture, your brain's like feeling very at risk because everything under the matrix tells you if you don't follow these rules, like very bad things will happen. So it's really intense the way our food life pulls on all these other parts of our survival. But to go back to the beautiful part, it's like when you eat freely and you say, fuck that shit, and you let your body be fully expressed, your soul comes online. And I always remind people, like, when you're undernourished or you're malnourished or your weight is suppressed, your light goes down, like your life force is lower and your spirit is like low down too. And when you just let yourself be fed, it's like your vibes, it just shoots out of your brain and your body, So it's a whole different kind of beautiful. And it's scary for people to let go of the body control game, but I'm like, dude, you don't even know what's waiting for you over there. Like that is attractive. That's magnetic when you're just like honoring yourself left and right. So yeah, it's a whole different way of existing.
What is the relationship here between food and exercise? Like, do you
Yeah.
notice that there is this sort of similar mentality when it comes to exercise, that people are misinformed or they don't know what to do for their body properly? Because I know you teach yoga and you do work with fitness as well. Like, what is this relationship here that people should know about food and movement?
Totally. I love that. That's a whole nother ball of wax too. Like, I almost feel like the way our nutrition and exercise messaging comes down on us from like the bodies that be, I don't know, pop culture or wherever, government, all the things, it's almost this feeling that like we are a bunch of idiots that have no idea what we need and don't know what to do. And so let me give you rules because you're obviously stupid. Like that's kind of how it feels. Like eat this many calories, it's just math, you idiot. Or like move this many times because if you obviously just want to be a couch blob, like what's your problem? The truth is, just like everything else in life, our bodies have intuitive cycles about how much or how little movement we need. And I think a huge issue is that we shame rest in our culture. I swear to God, it started with the Industrial Revolution. I want to go back in time and like interrupt the whole situation because we became like these crazy cogs in the wheel. So we don't have time to listen. So you don't need to be productive all the time. Think about the feminine cycles. That alone, like, what I'm talking about. There are times of the month where I'm like, don't come near me and I'm going to bed for 1 week, get away. And during that time, like, I don't need guilt and pressure that like I'm not running enough or I'm not out hiking and doing things. My body is like literally saying no. So with exercise, your body will tell you when you need more and when you need less. And just like with the food, it's kind of like this thing that you have to get back into, like learning that language again. Most people are scared if they stop, they're never going to want to move. And for some people, there's something called exercise resistance where there's so much stuff tangled in it, like shame and fear and not enough and perfectionism and stuff that they are paralyzed in their bodies. Like they just can't get moving. So breaking that scar tissue and thinking of movement is one of like 100 ways that you get to honor your body. And also, P.S., you have this crazy, awesome sensory machine that you get to live in. Like your body is actually like your like party vehicle for this like spin around the earth. And so I like to think about you can move for fun. Like you don't need to be on a mission to do anything. It's actually not true that you have to exercise to like feel cute in your skin. That's that point stuff where your body's like on a mission to be fully expressed based on your ancestry. That includes like how much muscle mass your body naturally carries versus fat ratios and stuff. And like a lot of that, you can change it a little, but not as much as we think. Those big transformations you see with people where they're like, I looked like this and now I'm super fit. Usually there's extreme stuff happening on both sides. Like maybe before the transformation, they were doing a lot of emotional eating and like really frozen in their body, like I was talking about. And then they got on a kick where now they're like over controlled and like forcing their body to do way more than they want to. And, eating like super clean or whatever. And now they're swung over here. when their best body is actually somewhere in the middle, where they're honoring rest and movement and play. And sometimes I want to hike every day for a week, and then for 3 months I want to focus on art projects, So putting exercise in its rightful place, which is like one of the many dynamic ways that we get to be alive, and not feeling this press that like if you're not doing it, you're like hurting yourself and something bad's going to happen.
So powerful. Do you have any advice for I was just thinking back, I was in Miami last weekend and I'm at the beach, and I feel like something I experienced, I'm reflecting back on that trip, but also I feel like so many people can probably relate to this. It's just the natural comparison of your body to other people, which is
Totally.
obviously just like a byproduct of everything that you've been talking about. And that leads to shame and guilt and like all that stuff that just habituates this pattern. Do you
Yeah.
have any tips specifically on comparison when it comes to comparing your body with others, or feeling like you
Yeah.
need to be exercising more, like eating less, or whatever the stories are for you in order, to feel like you're enough?
Totally. It's so hard. I mean, that is a natural part of being a human. I think if you think about monkeys in nature, like nobody wants to be the monkey on the bottom of the tree pile. You want to be the one at the top that like is like socially winning so that you're safe. It all boils back to like safety and reproduction. Like that's what we're trying to do all the time. So I don't know if you're familiar with, in therapy, there's a certain branch of therapy called internal family systems therapy, IFS. It's basically called parts work. And I'm not a therapist, so I'm not even going to try to explain the details of it, other than to say the theory is we have parts inside of us that develop over our lifespan for different purposes. And one of the parts that we develop is called a protector. So it's kind of our defenses that pop up when we feel at risk, right? And in our society right now, like we've worked through certain threads of racism and things like that to a degree, but there's always like a on top group and an on the bottom group. And right now we are still accepting the fact that we're super like being a wrong body is like on the bottom. Like we are just saying, like, unless you have this perfect idealized body, like you are at risk. So that part of your brain that's comparing, it really is a protector part. It's just a part of you that wants to feel secure and safe. And so recognizing that that doesn't have to be your authentic truth. I can be at the beach and like trying really hard to have a great time and just be present and enjoy myself, and the protector can be activated because it's kind of a high risk environment. Like my body's out, and bodies, I hate this, but in our society today, my body isn't safe. Our bodies are safe, but the message is that something risky. Don't you feel like that sometimes? Like a tiny hair that's out of place, or like I love to talk about the fact that I have a smaller body just genetically, but like I totally have cellulite. I always have. And I used to feel so much shame about it. And now I'm like, you know what? I hope somebody sees that I have cellulite and I am still walking down the beach like this act of bravery. So, yeah, I think that part that wants to feel secure is probably always going to be activated in some way, and that is okay. And thanking and acknowledging it, and knowing that you'll always be better than some people and worse than some people. And someone has to be the weird chick on the beach. Like, why not me? I think the one other thing I would say about that too is we feel like everyone is scrutinizing us, but most people are worried about themselves. They're in their own head about their own body and freaking out about what other people think about them. So they might notice you. It might be a fleeting judgment. And then what? I like to walk my brain through that too. Like, even if they think I'm the ugliest, weirdest person here, then what happens? They just think that, and maybe they're not going to date me. I don't know. Nothing actually happens. You're okay.
Thank you for all of that. It was really interesting watching my own internal dialogue when I was at the beach, and like feeling uncomfortable in certain areas of my body, or like, and just noticing, because the judgments that we're projecting, that other people, like we see someone and we're like they're judging us, it's actually your own projection. It's your own judgment of yourself.
Totally. And you know what's a really interesting thought? We receive something called a social imprint. So I'm just going to call it the matrix. And my hands always do this when I talk about it because it feels like a top down umbrella that's just like laid over us. It's like, here's how you be a person. And then we're like, ah. So from that matrixy umbrella, we learn like these kind of boobs and this kind of face, and like you got to be shaped like this. Like this is the good one. It's usually the one that's most unattainable naturally. So we're all spending our whole lives trying to do this thing that's not real. Um, so we all have sort of this like given mass media social imprint. But underneath that, human to human, what we're actually attracted to and find beautiful is like dramatically different. It's really cool. Like the example I always use, I'm sorry if Brad Pitt listens to your podcast, but I don't find him attractive. But I know that like in America, like he was gorgeous man of the year or something. And I was like, I literally cannot see it. Like I look at him and I'm like, do not touch me, like get away. But apparently he's like stunningly perfect according to the metric, right? So something in my biology is like hard no. I also don't tend to love guys that are like super ripped, but I'm sure a lot of guys feel like unless they're super ripped, like no girl's going to want to date them. To me, it's repelling. Probably because of the work I do. I'm like, why are you working out so much? What does this mean about your psyche? But the point is, we spend all this time trying to make sure that we're fitting the matrix ideals when the reality is the person looking at you, everyone that comes towards you has their own lens that they're looking through. Some people are really turned off by people who look perfect because they seem weird and unattainable and threatening, you know? And so you just have to know that your most attractive self is the one that's authentic. And when you like are just sunk in and like being weird and maybe you have weird wrinkle, I have a new gray streak right here. I was like, I'm going to keep that going. I'm kind of into it. My son said my wizard hair is showing. I was like, yeah.
I love that.
I know. But like, you know, those parts of us that are weird, like you might actually like me more because I have white streaks in my hair. Where someone who their value system is different, they will be repelled by that and they'll want someone who has a different style of hair and body, you know? So we get to communicate like I'm into authenticity. I'm into being a flawed, real human that has cellulite and gray hair, and I'm smiling, and I watch me run around and have fun. Like that's what I'm doing. And then you'll attract and draw people in who are of that same vibe. But when we're all trying to like bend to the metric of the matrix, you're not really you. They're not really them. Like we're all kind of relating in this fake kind of way. So I think that can be helpful too, just continuing to peel your brain back over and be like, what do I actually want to attract in? Who am I really? How do I stand in my truth? Know that the protectors are going to flare up and make me feel that I might be unsafe. But when you start to do it like you did, Aaliyah, you're like, I'm at the beach anyway. Your brain starts to make connections like, oh, I felt gross in my body, but like that girl smiled at me and the sun felt amazing on my skin. And like I had fun. And my husband is still married to me. And we start to disprove the story that unless you look like this, your life is shit. So you got to get out there and do it anyway. And then it starts to get a lot easier.
I highly encourage everyone to follow Amy because literally like such empowering content, Amy, and just so permission giving. And this is a beautiful segue into something that I'm really excited to explore with you. And that is the topic of aging. Mm-hmm. And aging without the guilt or without the shame or without all like this whole narrative continues on. And I'm in my mid 30s now, and I'm seeing all around me and my girlfriends, even in myself, like fear about aging is a topic that is coming up a lot now, and people being uncomfortable with the way that their bodies are changing, with, you know, like losing hair or their hair changing or wrinkles or whatever. And we see also this like such a strong narrative for women about like Botox and just all of these things to like maintain your youth, which, you know, like no judgment at all to anyone who wants to do any of those things. But I think that there's something deeper going on, as we've been talking about all along. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on normalizing and bringing joy to the aging process, or whatever you have to share about this journey that our bodies just naturally go through.
Yes, I have so many thoughts there too. And I like what you just said. Like, It's so important to say there's no judgment in any direction, because the reality is, like, let's say that I'm like, I'm going to be myself. Okay, I have been in therapy since I was like 12 and I'm 42. Like, there's a deep, deep kind of like healing that has to happen for us to be able to show up and just take ownership. And some people I've worked with, we'll get to certain points and they'll be like, Aim, I see all of this and I get it. I see the matrix. I see myself. I understand what I'm doing now. And the world's not changing fast enough. Like, I'm so uncomfortable every day. So the goal of talking about all this stuff and getting to a different place is to be able to be conscious. It makes me so sad when people get Botox because they literally think they have to. Like, they don't have any other path. But if someone is conscious and they see the pros and cons and they see like the cultural underpinnings and the worthiness stuff, and then they choose from a place of integrity with themselves, to me, it's like, then you choose whatever you want to choose. So aging, I'm 42 and I never ever want to go backwards. And I love the wisdom. I love being grounded. I will tell you, because you're not there yet, but your 40s, I feel like you're just like, I really don't care anymore. I don't care. And there are days when I look in the mirror and I'm like, dang girl, you looking old. It's tough. I think that it is starting to shift. It feels like people are having conversations about like, why? Like, you probably have read all about this. I'm so into it, like the history of witches and like all of that narrative, right? And like the wisdom. I am so sad that we are a culture where when people start to get older, we think they're like trash. We think they're dumb and like kind of annoying, and we shut them down and we keep pretending like we're younger. It's like that middle ages, or like the 20s, 30s is like the only one. But there was a time in history where the older you were, like the more revered and magical you were considered to be. And like people respected you because they were like, she has lived some shit. And I'm like, how do we not think that way? So I like to think that way about myself. I just sit here with my little gray hair and I'm like, I have lived some shit, you fool, So knowing that age is wisdom. There's cool science here, I will say, that biologically, the way our brains are wired, if you're doing the deeper work, which I will acknowledge that our society does not want us to, like the way we live is like, oh, you're uncomfortable, be quiet. And also like, oh, you have feelings, you are way extra, like stop that, And so we move through the years without doing our deep soul's work. If you haven't had a dark night of the soul by the time you're in your 30s or 40s, like probably there's some stuff in there that you're not moving through. So the way it works biologically is in our late teens and 20s, you're literally wired to be obsessed with appearance and sexuality and attraction and dating and boys and girls and opinions. It's like in our DNA, because those are baby making years. And then in your 30s, you are still focused on mating and attraction, but there's like a deepening that happens if you're allowing it. And that deepening is more of that existential, like soul purpose stuff. That's a lot of times where people start to feel the callings of like, what do I really want? Like, how do I really want to be living? If you go into that, then you'll be okay as you continue on. But what happens for a lot of people is they just close it off, close it off, close it off. In your 40s, as your 40s, 50s, 60s, technically becoming less youthfully attractive. If everybody's been alongside each other doing our spiritual work, then you land in this place where we're connecting because of depth and, truth and deeper layers of love and attraction. As you age, you ideally are moving into like, I want deep connection. If you've been healing all along, then as you get older, you can be on that vibration. But if you've been spending all your years in this like surface kind of like, no, I'm not going down there, and doing all this like top stuff of dieting and body control and like getting the portion, all this stuff, then as your body starts to go, shit hits the fan. Like you are now in the fire, And I think that's part of why we hang on to the youth stuff. It's like, don't go yet, I'm not ready. So I guess my thought on all of it is like, be in your truth as much as possible all the way along. Honor the fact that our society is a hot mess. It is so rude the way it's like, oh, you're looking ugly over there. Get out of here. It's like, we're all going to go downhill. But doing that deeper work sets us up so that as things shift, you will be able to move into those deeper layers and be okay. That's what I think. But I don't really know. I mean, deep convos, it's hard stuff.
I love it though. I love like the timeline trajectory that you
Mhm.
shared. At least in my life, it's been like that's literally on point. Like 30, literally 30 was when my dark night of the soul began. It was like that moment of like, wait, what the fuck? Like, am I
Mhm.
really just chasing all this external stuff?
Yep.
And I love that. I love the wisdom that you're sharing that. And I've heard this echoed from other people too, that your 40s and onwards, it's like, I don't even give a fuck anymore about what people think. I feel confident in myself. I feel stable in myself. And I hope our society gets back to that place you spoke of really celebrating that crone wisdom. I
I
think part
know.
of it, like you touched on too, it's like it's if that person who is like in their 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, doesn't see themselves as a wisdom keeper, if they are still playing on that, like trying to hold on to like the good old days or whatever, then it's like there's a disconnect there. So I feel like the more that we have conversations like this, I feel like the more that people learn to accept themselves through the beautiful work that you're doing and love themselves and not be afraid of going into the darkness, because we have to look at the places that are hard to look at.
Yes.
um I think that's so hopeful. And it is, to me, like looking at our society, it's crazy and it's scary at times and unpredictable, and there's more and more and more people that are waking up,
Mhm.
that are like, okay, I believe that there's a different way and I want to figure it out, and I'm going to face my fear and go into the depths, because I don't want to be controlled and I don't want to be told what to do, and I don't want to be made constantly like I'm not enough. So
Yeah.
thank you for the beautiful permission.
Yes, girl. Yes to all of that. And I would just add to that really quickly that like diet culture, when you do this work of like healing your relationship with food and body, it's like you go down, like you sink in, because it's like a membrane in our society where we stay above our truth. So when you go into your relationship with food in your body, it's like you break underneath. And in my mind, I'm like, what is the point of being alive? I really love like the depths of that now. Like I'm fully recovered from my own eating disorder. I like everything I ask someone to do, I'm like, dude, I have done it and I have lived it. But there were times in the darkness, the depth of my feelings. I literally called my therapist. I was like, I actually think I'm dying. Like, I do not think the human body has the capacity to hold the cracking that is happening inside of my psyche right now. And she's like, you're not dying. But ever since those moments, I'm like, this is why we live the way we live. Because when you're actually connected, it's fucking scary sometimes. But then you go through that and you burn it off. And on the backside is where you get insight and wisdom and peace and joy and all these other things. And I'm like, I would never trade that. I hope I'm like old and wrinkly and weird and I'm going to have all these beautiful boyfriends trailing along and like a wild life, you know? I want all that. So, yeah. I encourage everyone to just think about what would life be like if you were all of it. Like eat freely, be in your body, feel all the things, you only live here once as far as we know right now, maybe 10, 20, I don't know. But yeah, in this lifetime, there's so much to be had when we let it all go.
Something that you said that is so key is finding that support group, finding at least that one person, whether it's your therapist, your nutritionist, your friend, a mentor, a coach that can, or a community that can really hold you in that transition. I know for me, when I was really going through it is when I met you through a mastermind
Yeah.
that we were in. And I don't honestly know how I would have gotten through that transition had it not been for your support and the support of the sisters that we met during
Yeah.
that. So
Yep.
truly finding your people and knowing that even in those darkest moments, you're not alone. Also, people have gotten through it. Like Amy just shared, like people have made their way through. So it's possible for anyone. And I'd love to just hear if you could share where people can connect with you more, or if anyone feels call to work with you or get to know a bit more about your practice, where can people find you?
Totally. I agree so much. Having a tribe is like critical moves. And so my practice, I've really built it around creating like sustainable, long lasting connection between myself and the people I work with. But also, I have really beautiful group programs where we move through all this stuff together in like small pods of sisters that are just working on the same stuff. So my Instagram is at Amy Ornelas RD. And then my website is www.i-heart-nutrition.com, and everything is over there. Yeah, it's the best work. Like with me or anyone that does any of the work like this, like it is so worth at least touching on and seeing where you fall with it, because it can unravel everything else. So yeah, man, good stuff.
Thank you so much, Amy. This was just such a beautiful conversation, so empowering, something that I know I'm going to be listening to again and coming back to, because I feel like just anytime you feel bad or low, just like listen to this conversation and it's gonna bring you back into alignment. So thank you so much for sharing your magic.
Thank you. I appreciate you right back. Thanks, girl.
Thank you so much for joining us in today's Soul Sesh episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, go ahead and send it to a friend who you think will benefit from this conversation. Share it across your socials, tag me and Amy so that we can hear your feedback and share what you've taken away, and make sure to subscribe to the Soul Sesh podcast so you're notified when the next episodes go live. I'm so grateful for you, and I'll see you again very soon.